In our previous class, we discussed about the asexual reproduction in plants and lower organisms. Most of the plants reproduce asexually, and some of the lower organisms also produce asexually. All the other organisms and some plants reproduce sexually. As we know, for sexual reproduction, a male and female individual is compulsory. In the case of plants and animals, this two gender is compulsory. First, we are going to discuss about the sexual reproduction in plants. We already discussed about the vegetative parts of a plant. Stem, root, leaf, etc. are vegetative part of a plant. Flower is the reproductive part of a plant. There are two types of flowers: bisexual flowers and unisexual flowers. In the case of bisexual flowers, it contains both the male and female reproductive parts in a single flower, which contains male and female reproductive parts is known as bisexual flowers. If it contains only male or female reproductive part, it is known as unisexual flower. There are two types of flowers: bisexual flowers and unisexual flowers. Bisexual flowers contains both the male and female reproductive parts in a single flower. Unisexual flowers contains either male or female reproductive part in a single flower. This bisexual and unisexual flowers may be in a single plant. A single plant contains unisexual flowers of different kinds, a male and female. But a flower, each flower has only one part, male or female. Stamen is the male reproductive part of a plant. Stamen is the male reproductive part of a plant. It contains mainly two parts: anther and filament. Anther and filament. Pollen grains is the male sperm of the flower. This pollen grains is contained in the anther. Filament helps to raise anther in upper part of the flower. This is anther, this is filament. This filament raises anther in the upper part of the flower. Anther contains pollen grains. These pollen grains are the male sperm of the flower. Pistil is the female reproductive part of a flower. It contains three parts: stigma, style and ovary. Stigma, style and ovary. Pistil is the female reproductive part of a plant, which contains three parts: stigma, style and ovary. Stigma is a sticky part. It rises above the petals. Style is a tube-like structure which carry pollen from stigma to ovary. Ovary contains ovule. Ovule is the egg. Ovary contains ovule. When the male sperm, pollen grains, fuses with ovule, it produces a seed. It produces a seed. So, pollen from anther reaches to stigma first, then it moves from stigma to ovary through style. These are the part of a sexual reproductive part of a flower. Stamen is the male reproductive part. It contains anther and filament. Anther contains pollen grains. Pistil is the female reproductive part of a plant. It contains three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Pollen grains from the anther reaches the stigma of the flower and move through style to ovary. Ovary contains ovule. These pollen grains fuses with ovule to form a zygote. Then, how pollen from anther reaches to stigma? It may be in a single flower in the case of bisexual flowers. It may be in different flowers in the case of unisexual flowers. The process of the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower is called pollination. The transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. There are two types of pollination: self-pollination and cross-pollination. In self-pollination, anther and stigma in a single flower. Anther of a flower, pollen from anther of a flower reaches to the stigma of the same flower is known as self-pollination. A flower pollinates itself. Anther and stigma is there in a single flower. Pollen of anther of the same flower reaches the stigma is known as self-pollination. In the case of bisexual flowers, unisexual flowers, anther and stigma are in two different plants or in two different flowers. So the pollen from anther of a flower reaches to the stigma of another flower. Some agents like wind, water, or insects help to transfer pollen from one flower to another. This type of transfer of pollen from anther to stigma is known as cross-pollination. Self-pollination, cross-pollination. After pollination, fertilization occurs. When pollen reaches the stigma of the flower, it moves through style and reaches the ovary. After reaching ovary, ovary contains ovule. This pollen fuses with this ovum and fertilizes. Fusion of nuclei of pollen and ovule to form a zygote. Pollen is brought by any pollinating agent mentioned above on the stigma of the pistil. The fertilized egg then changes to seeds, which are capable of germinating into seedlings and become a new plant. This is the method of sexual reproduction in plants. All the plants having seeds reproduce sexually. For example, mango, jackfruit, coconut, etc. etc. Any plant having seeds to develop a new plant is reproduced sexually. All others, just like our rose, just like that, tapioca, etc., reproduce asexually because we use stem for reproducing. This picture shows the germination of a seed. You may sow the germination of seed. You can see this by putting a seed into water. For example, green gram. Any other pulse. When we put it in water, after a few days it starts germinating. We can plant it into soil for getting new plants. Now we are going to discuss about the sexual reproduction in animals. All the animals other than some lower animals reproduce sexually. In the case of sexual reproduction, two individuals are compulsory. female body receives sperm from male and fuse the ovule from the female body, and zygote is formed in the female body, and it may give birth or lay egg. That means the main part of reproduction is occurred in the female body in the case of most of the organisms. Some organisms lay egg and hatch the egg, use a new baby. Such organisms are known as oviparous organisms. Oviparous organisms. Animals that lay egg is known as oviparous. It includes fish, frog, reptiles, birds, etc. etc. Just like human and cows, dogs, etc., the baby develops inside the mother's womb and give birth after reaching the full growth. Such organisms are known as viviparous organisms. Organisms which give birth to a new child after getting the full growth is known as viviparous organisms. Some other organisms like tapeworms, earthworms, etc., both the male and female sex organs are in a same individual. Male and female sex organs are in the same individuals are known as hermaphrodites. Hermaphrodite. It have both male and female reproductive organ in a single body. Now we are going to discuss about the reproduction in human. Human starts reproduction only after completing adolescence age. The period from infancy to reproductive maturity in human includes childhood and adolescence. The human having infancy and childhood have no ability for reproduction. After reaching the age of adolescence, starts growing his sex organs, and completing the age of adolescence or reaching a half period, all the sex organs become mature and human starts reproducing or attain the ability to reproduce. Normally human life contains different stages: infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and finally aging. Human having infancy, childhood, and aging have no ability for reproduction normally. Adolescence in human beings. What is adolescence? The body undergoes natural changes on grows into the reproductive period of life. These changes begin around the age of 10 to 11 and last till 18 to 19 years of age. This stage of life is called adolescence. The age starting from 10 to 11 to 18 to 19 years is known as age of adolescence. All the sex organs in our body become developed during this stage. The time period when changes occur in human make them capable of reproduction is called puberty. Capable of reproduction. When the sex organs start growing at the age of 10 to 11 and last till 18 to 19. But if human reaches the age of 15 or 16, he reaches the puberty. That means he attained the ability for reproduction. Not only the human, all other organisms like this. But the adolescent age is very less in most of the organisms, and it is a long period in the case of human. The period between birth and maturity is very short in animals other than human. In case of human, it occurs a lot of changes during this time. We can discuss all these changes in our coming classes. The changes can be classified into physical changes and physiological changes. We can discuss later.